She was just his maid, cleaning his penthouse to survive, until a single phone call forced her into a deal that would change both their lives forever. Rain struck the glass walls of Nathaniel Hayes' penthouse with the ferocity of 1,000 small fists, streaking the view of Manhattan into a blur of neon and steel. From his 39th floor, the city looked like another world entirely. Alive, untouchable, yet suffocating. Nathaniel stood with his hands in the pockets of his tailored suit, his jaw rigid as his lawyer's voice echoed in his mind. 30 days, Mr. Hayes. If you don't marry before your 35th birthday, your grandfather's will strips you of the family fortune. Ironclad. No loopholes. The words were a chain around his neck. For years, Nathaniel had outsmarted rivals, broken competitors, and built a tech empire valued at billions. He could negotiate mergers that took months in a single afternoon. But marriage, love, commitment, those were foreign territories, chaotic, dangerous, unprofitable. The women he had known wanted the sheen of his money or the glitter of his name, never the man beneath. He had learned early to wall off his heart, brick by brick, until even he wasn't sure if it was still beating. He turned away from the storm, silence pressing against him. A faint sound floated up from the hallway, just outside his office door. At first he thought it was static from the storm, then he heard it again, raw, breaking. A woman's voice. Carmen Silva's voice. She had been his maid for 2 years, so quiet and efficient that Nathaniel hardly noticed her presence. She slipped in and out of rooms like a shadow, polishing glass, folding linen, leaving faint traces of lemon and lavender behind. He had never asked about her life, never cared to know more than her name on the payroll. Yet tonight her voice trembled with urgency, slicing through his carefully eye. Unsolated world. Please, she whispered into the phone, her accent thickening as desperation rose. I just need more time. I'm working double shifts. I'm selling everything I own. My daughter's surgery. Her voice broke. She's only 8. Without it. Nathaniel's chest tightened as silence filled the gap. He heard the other end faintly, the flat, uncompromising tone of a hospital billing office. Words like arrangements, loan, can't wait much longer. Then Carmen again, quieter now, as if she were folding into herself. No bank will give me that kind of money. I clean houses for a living. Her breath hitched. She's just a little girl. Something shifted in Nathaniel. Against his will, an image formed. A little girl fighting for breath while her mother begged strangers for mercy. He had always told himself he was immune to other people's suffering, that money solved problems before they ever touched him. But this was different. This wasn't a nameless charity appeal or a headline in the Times. This was happening in his hallway, under his roof, in the voice of a woman who scrubbed his marble floors while her child's heart failed. Carmen hung up, her silence heavier than the storm. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, the decision forming faster than logic could argue. Here, unexpectedly, was his answer. The solution to his grandfather's ultimatum. The solution to her impossible need. The next morning, Carmen entered the penthouse with eyes rimmed red, her movements sharper than usual, as if keeping busy could outrun despair. Nathaniel waited for her in his office, his expression carved from stone. Mrs. Silva, he said. His voice was clipped, formal, though his pulse thudded. I need to speak with you privately. She froze in the doorway, clutching her cleaning apron as though it were armor. Yes, Mr. Hayes? Sit. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. She didn't. Shaw. He looked like a cornered animal, her pride and fear warring in her posture. I overheard your call last night. Carmen's cheeks burned crimson. She shook her head, voice breaking. I'm sorry, sir. It won't affect my work, I swear. My personal problems are mine alone. Nathaniel leaned forward, his gaze steady. How much? Her brow furrowed. Excuse me? The surgery, hospital bills, recovery, all of it. How much? Carmen blinked at him, confusion widening into suspicion. Why do you need to know? He didn't answer at first. He simply reached into his desk and laid a folder before her, the contract his lawyers had prepared overnight. His tone was even, deliberate, but beneath it was a tension like a wire pulled tight. Because I have a proposal, a solution that benefits us both. For 7 months, you will play the role of my wife, publicly, socially, legally. At the end, you'll receive $500,000, more than enough for your daughter's surgery and future. All I ask is your agreement to the terms. Carmen stared at the folder as though it might burn her. Her breath came shallow. You want me to marry you? Yes. His answer was sharp, decisive. Not out of love, out of necessity. She shook her head, the room tilting. This is madness. Is it madder than letting your daughter die because you can't afford to save her? His words landed like a blade, cruel but unflinching. The storm outside rattled the windows. Carmen's eyes filled, her lips trembling. She wanted to scream at him, to throw the folder back in his face, and yet, Sophia's small, labored breaths haunted her every moment. Nathaniel watched her wrestle with the impossible, his own chest tight with the suspense he hadn't felt in years. He had offered a deal. Now he needed to know, would she damn him or save them both? Rain had given way to a brittle, pale morning. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant, the kind of place where strangers became spouses and fight. 15 minutes and left with rings that meant little more than ink on a page. Carmen's hands trembled as she held the pen, her name looping awkwardly across the marriage certificate beside Nathaniel's precise signature. The cream dress she wore was borrowed from her neighbor, too loose in the shoulders, while his navy suit looked like it had been cut by the gods themselves. The judge's voice droned like a distant echo. "Do you, Nathaniel Hayes, take Carmen Silva?" It didn't matter what he said. The words weren't vows, not really. They were legal obligations wrapped in ceremony. Carmen's mind screamed that this was wrong, that she was selling herself into a contract as cold as the marble under her shoes. Yet when she thought of Sophia's small hand clutching hers in the hospital bed, when she heard again the rasp in her daughter's lungs, there was no other path. "You may kiss the bride." The judge's words snapped her from thought. Nathaniel hesitated only a moment before pressing his lips to her cheek, a gesture that looked tender to an outsider but felt more like a transaction sealed. He whispered, "Congratulations, Mrs. Hayes." And for the first time, Carmen felt the weight of that name settle on her shoulders like a chain she couldn't remove. When they stepped outside, the press was already waiting. Flashbulbs ignited like fireworks, voices called out questions sharp as arrows. Who is she? A maid? A gold digger? A fairy tale bride? Nathaniel's arm slipped around her waist with practiced ease, pulling her close as though she had always belonged there. Carmen stiffened, every instinct urging her to pull away, but the pressure of his hand was iron. "Smile," he murmured under his breath, and she did, though it felt like betrayal. Moving into his world was like walking into a dream Carmen didn't want. The penthouse guest suite was larger than her entire apartment in Queens. The bathroom had marble counters and a soaking tub big enough to drown in. Every window opened onto views of Manhattan that made her dizzy. She unpacked her few belongings into closets already filled with clothes Nathaniel's assistant had purchased on her behalf. Designer gowns, shoes she'd never dared touch, jewelry tucked into velvet boxes. They were costumes, not clothes, costumes for the part of Nathaniel's wife. Sophia arrived 2 days later, cheeks pale but eyes bright after her surgery. Nathaniel had arranged for a private nurse, medical equipment delivered within hours, and a bedroom transformed into a child's wonderland, stuffed animals, shelves of books, even a ceiling that twinkled with tiny LED stars at night. When Sophia gasped, "Mommy, is this really our new house?" Carmen's throat closed. She couldn't tell her daughter the truth, that this house was a palace built on borrowed time. The first test came swiftly. Nathaniel informed her of a charity gala, an event he couldn't attend alone without raising questions. Carmen spent hours with stylists who draped her in emerald silk and painted her face into something unrecognizable. When she stepped into the mirrored hall, Nathaniel's gaze flickered with something she couldn't decipher. Admiration. Surprise. He offered his arm, and she took it because the contract demanded it. The gala was a battlefield of whispered questions and predatory smiles. Old money matrons eyed Carmen like a curiosity. Reporters angled for photos, murmuring Cinderella story and Maid turned millionaire. Carmen tried to shrink under the glittering chandeliers, but Nathaniel stood tall beside her, his voice smooth as steel whenever anyone pressed too far. "Sometimes you just know," he said when asked how they had met. His hand brushed hers, squeezing lightly, and though it was for show, Carmen felt the heat of it burn. But suspicion cut deeper than admiration. Eleanor Hayes, Nathaniel's mother, arrived like a storm cloaked in diamonds. Her words were sharp enough to slice through Carmen's fragile composure. "You worked as a maid before this marriage, didn't you?" she asked at the dinner table, voice loud enough to echo. Forks paused midair. Carmen's cheeks flamed, but she lifted her chin. "Yes, I cleaned houses to care for my daughter, including this one." A ripple of laughter, nervous, scandalized, ran through the guests. Eleanor leaned in, eyes cold as glass. "And now, after only weeks, you expect us to believe this is real?" Carmen's heart pounded. Every nerve screamed to run, to hide. Instead, she steadied her voice. "If I had a son, I would want to make sure the woman beside him loved him for who he is, not what he has." The room hushed. Nathaniel's eyes were locked on her, unreadable. When Eleanor pressed, "And do you?" Carmen's gaze flicked to Nathaniel. Something unexpected stirred in her chest as she answered, "Your son is the most honorable man I've ever known." He saved my daughter's life without asking for anything in return. He works harder than anyone I've met, and he's earned every piece of success he has. Silence. Then the clink of glasses resuming, conversations restarting. But Nathaniel didn't move. His expression was no longer the practiced mask of a businessman, but something softer, something almost dangerous. That night, on the terrace overlooking the city lights, Nathaniel joined her. "Thank you," he said quietly. She turned, surprised. "For what?" "For defending me," he answered. His voice was stripped of arrogance, almost vulnerable. Carmen looked at him under the silver wash of moonlight, wondering what kind of man lived behind the mask. For the first time since the contract began, the space between them felt charged, not with duty, but with something far more dangerous. She tightened her grip on the railing, her mind whispering the warning she already knew. This was supposed to be business. Nothing more. No complications. But the look in Nathaniel Hayes's eyes promised complications she couldn't begin to control. Days bled into weeks, and Carmen began to realize that the contract had underestimated one dangerous variable, the human heart. At first she thought she could keep her distance. She told herself she was simply a maid playing dress-up, wearing borrowed gowns and speaking polite rehearsed lines at Nathaniel's side, but then the little cracks began to appear. It started with sandwiches. She noticed how Nathaniel often forgot to eat, burying himself in paperwork, pacing his office until dawn. One night, she left a plate of food outside his door, planning to slip away before he noticed. But when she returned later, the plate was empty, the crust of bread neatly folded back onto it like a quiet acknowledgement. The next evening, she did the same, and the next. She never spoke of it, and neither did he. But sometimes, in the morning, she'd catch the faintest smile tugging at his lips when their eyes met across the breakfast table. Carmen told herself it meant nothing, just gratitude, just politeness. But late at night, when she heard Sophia's laughter mixing with Nathaniel's deeper chuckle from the living room, she wasn't so sure. Nathaniel, for his part, was changing. In ways he couldn't explain. He had thought Carmen's presence would be ornamental, a convenient solution to a legal problem, but every day she revealed a new piece of herself, and each piece chipped away at the walls he had built. He watched how she sang lullabies to Sophia in Spanish, her voice soft but steady, filling the vast penthouse with warmth it had never known. He noticed how she translated paperwork for Maria the cook, or helped James the doorman study for his citizenship exam. She treated everyone, maids, chauffeurs, caterers, with dignity, as if they were family. "Your wife is very kind," Maria whispered to him once in the kitchen. "She makes this house feel alive." The words unsettled him. Wife, kind, alive, none of those had ever belonged to his world before. But the true fracture came one evening, when Carmen found him asleep at his desk. The skyline pulsed faintly outside, neon and thunderclouds weaving through glass, but Nathaniel's head rested against a scatter of papers, his tie loosened, his jaw slack with exhaustion. Empty coffee cups littered the surface. For a moment she simply stood there, seeing not the billionaire titan of headlines, but a man, tired, human, vulnerable. Before she could think better of it, she reached for a blanket and draped it gently over his shoulders. His eyes flickered open, dazed. "Carmen?" She froze, caught. You looked cold." He blinked slowly, his lips curving into something half asleep, half unshielded. "Thank you." His voice was rough, real. And then he drifted back to sleep, leaving Carmen's heart hammering in the quiet room. The next morning, she told herself it was nothing, but her pulse betrayed her every time she remembered the softness in his voice. Suspense tightened when Sophia, ever observant, asked the question Carmen dreaded. "Mommy, does Nathaniel love you?" The girl sat cross-legged on her new bed, clutching the enormous teddy bear Nathaniel had given her. Carmen froze, searching for words. "It's complicated, mi amor," she murmured. Sophia's brow furrowed, but she let it go, humming to herself as she played with the bear's ribbon. Carmen knew children often saw the truth more clearly than adults. Nathaniel, too, began wrestling with emotions he didn't recognize. One evening, while helping Sophia with a card game, he realized he was laughing. Real, unguarded laughter that shook something loose in him. When he looked up, Carmen was watching from the doorway, her lips curved in a smile so gentle it felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. His chest ached. He wanted to thank her, to confess something, but the words turned to ash in his throat. The charity circuit kept them in the spotlight. At another gala, they were forced to dance for the cameras. Nathaniel's hand slid around Carmen's waist, his other clasping hers. The world blurred as the music swelled. Their bodies moved in rhythm, closer than they had ever been, faces inches apart. To everyone else it looked like passion. To them it felt like danger. Her breath quickened. His pulse thundered. When the song ended, he held her gaze a fraction too long before stepping back, the mask snapping into place. But Carmen knew something had shifted. Then came the night it all nearly unraveled. Carmen returned to the penthouse late from visiting her mother, only to find Nathaniel in the workshop beneath the penthouse, sleeves rolled, grease staining his hands as he bent over a gutted vintage car engine. She hadn't known this side of him. His suit jacket was tossed carelessly aside, his hair tousled, his face smudged. He looked ordinary, real. "What are you doing?" she asked, stepping closer. He glanced up, startled. "Escaping," he admitted. His voice was raw. "From all of it. From myself." Carmen watched him work, fascinated by the precision of his hands, the care with which he handled each piece of machinery. "I never would have guessed," she whispered. "There's a lot you don't know about me," he said, eyes locking on hers. For a moment, the air between them crackled with unspoken things. That night, Carmen lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing his words over and over. "There's a lot you don't know about me." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to peel back the layers of stone and steel until she found the man beneath. But the contract hung over her like a shadow. 3 months had passed. 4 remained. Already she feared she was in too deep. Already she feared what would happen when pretending ended. The penthouse was unusually quiet that afternoon. Carmen moved through Nathaniel's office, tidying the chaos he left in his wake. Papers stacked unevenly, pens scattered like fallen soldiers, coffee cups gone cold. She hummed under her breath, something soft in Spanish, trying to ignore the way her heart always tightened when she stepped into his private space. She had promised herself she would keep boundaries. She had promised herself she would never confuse kindness for love. But promises, she was learning, were fragile things. She stacked the papers neatly, sliding a folder across the desk, then froze. Her name, printed in bold on the tab. Carmen's chest constricted. She reached for it slowly, as though the folder itself might bite. Curiosity battled with dread, but her fingers opened it before she could stop herself. Inside were photographs, grainy, candid, some of her leaving her apartment in Queens, others walking Sophia to school, one of her crying outside a hospital. Beneath them were pages of reports, neatly typed profiles outlining her financial struggles, Sophia's medical condition, even her work schedules. Some dated back more than a year. Her stomach lurched. The room tilted. This wasn't recent. This wasn't after the contract. Nathaniel had known everything about her long before. The office door creaked. Nathaniel's voice, low and starts. "Led, Carmen." She turned, the folder clutched like a weapon, her face burned with betrayal. "Explain." He froze, eyes locking on the evidence in her hands. His jaw tightened, then loosened, the mask cracking. "It's not what you think." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "Not what I think? Because it looks exactly like stalking, Nathaniel. It looks like you were watching me long before you ever offered this marriage." He raked a hand through his hair, the composure of the billionaire crumbling. "I can explain. Please, just..." "How long?" she cut in, voice shaking. "How long have you been watching me, following me like some acquisition you were planning to buy?" His silence was damning. She dropped the folder onto the desk with a slap that echoed through the office. "Was this all a lie? The contract, the inheritance, everything? Was I just another business deal to you?" Nathaniel stepped forward, anguish etched across his face. "The inheritance is real. The contract is real. But Carmen, this didn't start with business. It started with you." Her chest heaved. Don't you dare romanticize this. You invaded my life, my privacy, my daughter's life. "I first saw you at the hospital," he burst out, his voice breaking. 18 months ago, you were reading to Sophia while she had tests done. You were terrified, but you smiled through it. You held her hand like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. I couldn't look away. Carmen's eyes widened, horror mingling with disbelief. You were at the hospital?" "My foundation donates to children's medical programs. I was there for a board meeting, and then I saw you." He moved closer, desperation raw in every word. "I asked my assistant to find out who you were, and then months later, your name appeared on the employment applications. I thought it was fate. I didn't hire you, you were already on the list. Having you in my me, even as a housekeeper, felt like a gift I didn't deserve." Her throat closed. His words, tender and aching, battled with the fury pounding in her blood. So you manipulated everything. You set me up for this marriage charade. You preyed on my desperation. I swear to you, he whispered, stepping closer. I would have paid for Sophia's surgery no matter what. I was already planning to do it anonymously before the contract. The inheritance just gave me an excuse. Carmen, I didn't know how else to be near you. The room spun. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You don't fall in love with housekeepers, Nathaniel. You fall in love with fantasies. He shook his head fiercely. No, I fell in love with you, with the way you sing to Sophia when you think no one is listening, with the way you translate documents for Maria after your shift, with your strength, your kindness, your fire. You think I created this? No, you created me, Carmen. You made me want something real for the first time in my life. Her tears spilled, hot and furious. But you lied. You planned me. How am I supposed to trust anything you feel? He swallowed hard, voice breaking. Because what I feel when you look at me isn't planned. It's not strategy. It's the only truth I've ever known. Silence pressed heavy between them, broken only by the ticking of his grandfather's antique clock. Carmen backed away, her heart tearing in two. I can't do this right now. I need time. Carmen, I said I need time. Her voice cracked, but she forced steel into it. She turned, walking out of the office, out of the penthouse, into the storm of Manhattan night. Nathaniel stood alone, the folder spread open on his desk like the ruins of everything he had tried to build. His empire had survived lawsuits, scandals, betrayals from men twice as ruthless as he was. But now, for the first time in his life, Nathaniel Hayes was truly afraid, because the one thing he couldn't negotiate, the one deal he couldn't close, was the trust of the woman who held his heart. And Carmen, out in the rain-soaked streets, knew that no matter how far she walked, no matter how much distance she tried to put between them, the truth would follow her like a shadow. She had agreed to a contract. She had agreed to a role, but she had never agreed to fall in love with the man behind it. And now she didn't know if love was enough to survive the lies. Carmen walked until the city blurred. Rain slicked her hair against her face, soaking through her borrowed coat, but she didn't stop. The streets pulsed with light and noise, honking taxis, flashing billboards, the rumble of the subway beneath her feet, but all she could hear was Nathaniel's voice echoing in her head. I saw you at the hospital. I couldn't look away. I didn't know how else to be near you. Her heart rebelled against her anger. She wanted to hate him, to reduce him to the manipulator who had reduced her life to a folder of reports and surveillance. But every memory fought back. The way he had carried Sophia when she was weak after surgery, his unguarded laughter at her bedtime jokes, the way he had thanked Carmen softly when she draped a blanket over him. Was that man the same one who had watched her life from a distance like she was another acquisition? By dawn, her feet carried her to a small church tucked between skyscrapers, a place she had visited only once before, on the night she had begged God for a miracle for Sophia. Inside, the air smelled of wax and wood polish. Father Miguel, old and bent but sharp-eyed, looked up from arranging hymnals. Mija, he said in Spanish, you look troubled. The dam broke. Carmen sank into a pew, her hands twisted together, and poured out the entire story, the contract, the marriage of convenience, the growing affection, and now the unbearable discovery of Nathaniel's secret. She spoke of betrayal, of love, of fear that everything she felt was built on a lie. Father Miguel listened in silence, his lined face soft with compassion. When she finally fell quiet, shaking, he placed a hand on hers. The question is not whether he manipulated circumstances. The question is whether his love for you is real now, and whether yours is real for him. Carmen's throat tightened. But how can I know for sure? Love, the priest said gently, is always a leap of faith. The only difference here is that you know the risks before you jump. His words followed her like a whisper as she left the church. A leap of faith. She wasn't sure she had that much courage. That evening, she returned to the penthouse. Sophia was asleep, tucked into her twinkling star room, her breathing even and strong. Carmen's feet carried her downward to the hidden workshop she had discovered weeks before. The door stood open. Inside, Nathaniel was bent over the shell of a vintage car, his sleeves rolled, his knuckles bloodied from scraping against metal. His movements were harsh, frantic, as if he could beat his guilt into submission with a wrench. You're going to hurt yourself, she said softly from the doorway. He looked up, startled, his eyes bloodshot, his face raw. I've already hurt what matters most. Carmen stepped inside, the the scent of oil and steel enveloping her. Tools hung in precise order, but tonight the workbench was chaos. Nathaniel himself was chaos. "Show me," she said. He blinked. "Show you what?" "Who you are when you're not trying to control everything, when you're not hiding behind contracts and strategies. Show me the truth." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he set down the wrench and whip. Had his hands on a rag, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of his empire had finally crushed him. "The truth," he said hoarsely, "is that I've been alone my entire life. My parents were names on invitations, not faces at the dinner table. Friends were people who wanted my last name, not my company. So I built walls, I built my company, I built myself into someone untouchable." He swallowed hard. "And then I saw you. You looked like everything I never knew I wanted. A family, real love, someone who chose to be there. And I was so afraid you would never choose me that I created a way for you to be here." Carmen's chest ached at his broken honesty. She whispered, "You used money to buy me." "I did," he admitted, his voice cracking. "And I will regret that until the day I die. But Carmen, what grew after? Your laughter, your strength, the way you've made this cold place a home. That wasn't bought. That was real." Silence stretched, heavy and trembling. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "The contract expires in 12 days. His gaze fell to the floor. "You'll take the money, start a new life with Sophia. I'll go back to being alone, but at least I'll know I saved the two people who mattered most." Her heart twisted. "And if I wanted to stay?" His head snapped up, eyes wide with fragile hope. "Stay? Not because of money, not because of a contract, but because somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, I fell in love with you too." Nathaniel's lips parted, but no sound came. His eyes shone, raw and unguarded, as if he were afraid to breathe in case the moment shattered. "Don't look at me like I'm saving you," Carmen whispered. "We'd be saving each other, but it has to be real this time. No contracts, no conditions, no more secrets." He reached for her then, hesitantly, as though she might vanish. His fingers brushed her cheek, trembling. "Carmen, I more than care about you. I love you. Not the fantasy, not the maid, not the contract bride. You, all of you." She leaned into his touch, tears spilling freely now. "And I love you, Nathaniel. The real you. The man who works with his hands, who reads bedtime stories to a little girl who isn't even his, who finally stopped hiding." His forehead pressed to hers, his breath shaky. "Then let's tear up the contract. Let's start over." "From nothing," she whispered. "From everything," he corrected softly. In that oil-scented workshop, among the ruins of metal and broken pride, they chose something far more fragile and far more powerful than any contract: trust. The days counted down like a ticking bomb. 12, 11, 10. Every morning Carmen awoke to the sight of Nathaniel at the breakfast table, his tie knotted neatly, his face composed as if nothing had changed. But the way his eyes softened when they met hers betrayed the truth. He was a man suspended between hope and despair, waiting for a verdict he couldn't control. Carmen felt it too. The contract sat locked in Nathaniel's desk drawer, its presence a ghost haunting every glance, every smile, every lingering touch. Sophia, oblivious to the tension, laughed and played, tugging Nathaniel into card games and bedtime stories that made Carmen's heart ache with dangerous longing. Every moment with him pulled her deeper, but every passing day whispered the reminder: soon it ends. On the morning of the last day, Manhattan was drenched in gold sunlight, but the penthouse felt like a tomb. Nathaniel was already in his office when Carmen entered. A set of papers lay on his desk, neatly stacked, cold, final. The divorce agreement. "The truth," he said hoarsely, "is that I've been alone my entire life. My parents were names on invitations, not faces at the dinner table. Friends were people who wanted my last name, not my company. So I built walls, I built my company. I built myself into someone untouchable." He swallowed hard. "And then I saw you. You looked like everything I never knew I wanted. A family, real love, someone who chose to be there. And I was so afraid you would never choose me that I created a way for you to be here." Carmen's chest ached at his broken honesty. She whispered, "You used money to buy me." "I did," he admitted, his voice cracking. "And I will regret that until the day I die. But Carmen, what grew after? Your laughter, your strength, the way you've made this cold place a home. That wasn't bought. That was real." Silence stretched, heavy and trembling. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "The contract expires in 12 days. His gaze fell to the floor. "You'll take the money, start a new life with Sophia. I'll go back to being alone, but at least I'll know I saved the two people who mattered most." her heart twisted. And if I wanted to stay? His head snapped up, eyes wide with fragile hope. Stay? Not because of money, not because of a contract, but because somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, I fell in love with you too. Nathaniel's lips parted, but no sound came. His eyes shone, raw and unguarded, as if he were afraid to breathe in case the moment shattered. Don't look at me like I'm saving you, Carmen whispered. We'd be saving each other, but it has to be real this time. No contracts, no conditions, no more secrets. He reached for her then, hesitantly, as though she might vanish. His fingers brushed her cheek, trembling. Carmen, I more than care about you. I love you. Not the fantasy, not the maid, not the contract bride. You, all of you. She and into his touch, tears spilling freely now. And I love you, Nathaniel. The real you. The man who works with his hands, who reads bedtime stories to a little girl who isn't even his, who finally stopped hiding. His forehead pressed to hers, his breath shaky. Then let's tear up the contract. Let's start over. From nothing, she whispered. From everything, he corrected softly. In that oil-scented workshop, among the ruins of metal and broken pride, they chose something far more fragile and far more powerful than any contract. Trust. The days counted down like a ticking bomb. 12, 11, 10. Every morning, Carmen awoke to the sight of Nathaniel at the breakfast table, his tie knotted neatly, his face composed as if nothing had changed. But the way his eyes softened when they met hers betrayed the truth. He was a man suspended between hope and despair, waiting for a verdict he couldn't control. Carmen felt it too. The contract sat locked in Nathaniel's desk drawer, its presence a ghost haunting every glance, every smile, every lingering touch. Sophia, oblivious to the tension, laughed and played, tugging Nathaniel into card games and bedtime stories that made Carmen's heart ache with dangerous longing. Every moment with him pulled her deeper, but every passing day whispered the reminder, soon it ends. On the morning of the last day, Manhattan was drenched in gold sunlight, but the penthouse felt like a tomb. Nathaniel was already in his office when Carmen entered. A set of papers lay on his desk, neatly stacked, cold, final. The divorce agreement. He didn't look up as she approached. His voice was low, flat. It's time. Carmen's throat tightened. You already had them drawn up. He nodded once. I wanted to make it easy for you. No disputes, no complications. The money has already been transferred to your account. You and Sophia will have everything you need. He paused, his hands curling into fists. And you'll never have to see me again. The words sliced through her, but she said nothing. She picked up the pen, her hand trembling, and stared at the line where she was meant to sign her freedom. Nathaniel's eyes stayed fixed on the skyline, his jaw rigid. He wouldn't beg. He wouldn't risk breaking the fragile dignity he had left. Carmen thought of the night in his workshop, his broken confession, his trembling hand on her cheek. She thought of Sophia's laughter when Nathaniel spun her in the air, of the quiet dinners where he asked about her day, of the man who had once been stone but now bled honesty. And suddenly she knew. With a steady breath, Carmen set the pen down. Instead of signing, she lifted the contract in both hands and tore it straight down the middle. The rip echoed like thunder in the silent room. Nathaniel's head snapped toward her, eyes wide. What are you doing? His voice was raw, incredulous. I'm not leaving, she said, her voice steady even as her heart raced. Not for the money, not for security, not because of a contract. I'm staying because I love you, Nathaniel, and I won't let a piece of paper dictate the end of us. For the first time, the armor shattered completely. Nathaniel's eyes filled with tears he didn't bother to hide. He crossed the room in 2 strides, his hands cupping her face as though she were the only thing tethering him to earth. Say it again. I love you, she whispered, tears spilling freely. Not the billionaire, not the mask. You, just you. His lips crashed a bow, against hers, not the careful, staged kisses of the past, but fierce, desperate, hungry. It was a kiss that burned away months of lies and fear, leaving only the truth. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Nathaniel pressed his forehead to hers. Then let's start over. No contracts, no timelines, just forever. And so they did. 6 months later, Central Park bloomed with spring, sunlight spilling across the grass where family and friends gathered for a wedding that was no longer an arrangement but a vow. Sophia scattered rose petals down the aisle, her laughter ringing like bells. Carmen walked toward Nathaniel in a gown of soft lace, her heart soaring. This time, when the minister said, "You may kiss the bride," Nathaniel's kiss was deep, reverent, filled with the promise of eternity. Their vows were simple but fierce. Carmen promised to love him through success and failure, wealth and hardship. Nathaniel promised to never hide behind walls again, to honor the truth of their love above all else. "I love you, Mrs. Hayes," he whispered against her lips. "I love you too, Mr. Hayes." 1 year later, beneath the glow of fireworks over the Manhattan skyline, they renewed those vows with Sophia by their side, and twins on the way. Carmen's hand rested on her rounded belly as Nathaniel spun her carefully on the dance floor, his eyes alight with joy. "Any regrets about marrying your fake wife for real?" Carmen teased softly. Nathaniel kissed her forehead. "Only that I waited so long to find the courage to love you the right way." Sophia tugged on his sleeve, pointing at the sky. "Look, Nathaniel, look at the lights." He scooped her up, holding her close as Carmen leaned against him, tears of joy glistening in her eyes. "What do you think, Princess?" he asked. "Should we make a wish?" Sophia shook her head, smiling with wisdom far beyond her years. "I don't need to. I already have everything I wanted." And as the fireworks lit up the night sky, Carmen knew she did too. Their love story had begun as a contract. It would end as a forever they had chosen, again and again and again.